Hello and welcome to JavaScript and Introduction. In this first part we're going to be looking at variables, but before we get started we need to first understand what we're actually going to learn in this course. Now we're going to be learning what's called vanilla JavaScript. We're not going to be looking at using JavaScript in web development, we're just going to be looking at the core fundamentals of the programming language itself. If you want to learn about using JavaScript for the web, then I would suggest still going through this course because there are a lot of key concepts that you need to understand. But if you feel confident with programming languages in general and you want to move on to the web, then have a look at a JavaScript for the web course. So before we get started actually writing the code, we need to be able to actually run the code that we write. So I'm using Visual Studio Code like every video, and I would suggest you do the same. It makes it very easy to do what we are going to do. So let's come to the Extensions tab and we'll search for Code Runner. And then we want the first one. Click on it. Click on the install button, that'll be there. And then once it's installed, it'll ask you to reload. Click reload and then the Visual Studio Code will reopen and it will be installed. Next, go to File and Preferences. And let's go to Settings. Come to the extensions and search for the run code config right here. We will type in the default language JavaScript, and then we will check the clear previous output right here. This just makes it so whatever's obviously output, we see it fresh every time. It doesn't back up from the previous runs. So now we can actually start learning about some JavaScript. Variables allow us to store data for later use and modification. They allow us to store a lot of different types of data. These are what we're going to learn about right now. So the first one we can store is a string. A string is a sequence of characters surrounded by apostrophes. And I'll quickly show an example. I'll just create a random JavaScript file. So we can have double apostrophes and anything in here is a string. We can have single apostrophes and that's a string. And obviously we can have a number of different characters, so we can have numbers, everything. That's all one string as long as it's in the apostrophes. The next form of data that can be stored are integers. Integers are simply whole numbers, so all of these are examples of integers, like so. It can go on and on, just whole numbers. The next is floats. Floats are very similar to integers, but they allow for decimal points, like so. All of these are examples of floats. And then we have booleans. Booleans represent a true or false value, or a 0 and 1 in binary form. We simply just write true or false. So now we understand the different data types that can be stored using variables. And just a side note, these aren't all the different data types that can be stored, but for the purpose of this video, this is as far as we're going to learn about. In different parts of this course, we will learn about different data types. So to actually create a variable, we write the word let, followed by the variable name, so that can be anything. I'll call mine new variable. And then we finish it off with a semicolon. Putting the semicolon at the end of each line in JavaScript is more of a preference thing. You don't actually have to do it in JavaScript like you do in other languages, but I prefer to just because I'm used to it. But obviously feel free to not put them there if that's what you prefer. So by default, we haven't given this new variable a value, so it gets a default value of undefined. And we can show that by logging this variable to the console. And what I mean by that is it's logging something to the console in Visual Studio that we have built in, and it allows us to log anything we want, and it's very useful for debugging, so we can check different values throughout the life cycle of a program. To actually log to the console, we write console.log followed by parentheses, and then in the parentheses we type what we want to log. So I want to log the variable, new variable, and I'll hit save. Then we'll hit Control Alt and N, and that will allow us to run our code using the extension that we just installed. And you can see there we get undefined. So to actually give the variable a value, we follow the variable name by an equal sign, and then the value that we want to give the variable. So this could be any of the data types that we've looked at before. So I want mine to be a string, and I'll set to if I could type, I'm a string, like so. And if I save that and run my code again, you'll see I'm a string. Once we've created a variable, we can modify it later on in our application by simply typing the variable name. so new variable, and setting it equal to a new value. And then if we run that again, you'll see I'm a new variable. So that allows us to change variable types throughout the life cycle of a program. But what happens if we don't want that to happen? We want our value to stay the same no matter what. And to do this, we can use what is called a constant. And instead of the word let, we simply write const, and that defines that we want a variable of a constant. So now if I save that, and let's try and change the new variable now to something again, let's just anything, just a 2. If I save that and run, we'll see what happens. I get an error saying assignment to constant variable. So this stops us from actually being able to change the variable at all. It'll throw an error and it'll stop our program from running. So if I remove that and then run it, you see everything's fine, it prints just like normal. And that's it for the first part of this course, a nice little introduction to variables. Thank you for watching, I'll see you in the next part.